The forest had always been my sanctuary. After particularly grueling weeks, I'd escape the city's clamor and trek up the mountains for a night of solitude. The dim light of my flashlight and the muffled sounds of the night enveloped me in a comfortable cocoon. That Friday, as dusk gave way to dark, I began my ascent up the well-worn path. The chirping of crickets and the distant hoot of an owl were the only sounds that accompanied me. The air was damp and cool, a stark contrast to the muggy heat of the city below. Each footstep was deliberate, my boots crunching softly on the mixture of gravel and leaves. I had been hiking for about an hour when I suddenly felt it, a soft, cold hand wrapping around mine. My heart lurched. I assumed it was a fellow hiker, perhaps someone I had overtaken earlier. "Sorry," I muttered, pulling my hand back and turning on my flashlight. To my astonishment, there was no one there. My heart raced. I swung the flashlight's beam in all directions, desperately searching for the owner of the hand. But all I saw were trees and shrubs, their shadows dancing eerily on the ground. With my pulse throbbing in my ears, I tried to convince myself it had been a figment of my imagination, a stray vine or a momentary lapse in judgment. I took a deep breath and continued hiking, though with a heightened sense of alertness. But then it happened again. This time the hand gripped mine with more force, fingers intertwining with mine, as if seeking comfort. And this time, I felt a distinct presence beside me, an unseen companion. My flashlight revealed nothing but the endless path ahead. Panicking, I began to jog, desperate to escape the invisible presence. But no matter how fast I moved, the sensation remained, like a silent figure matching my pace, its breath cold against my neck. The forest that was once my refuge now felt oppressive, every tree a potential hiding place for my unseen pursuer. I stumbled upon a clearing where the moonlight streamed down, casting a pale blue glow over everything. Gasping for breath, I halted and strained my ears. I could hear something, a faint whisper, like soft fabric brushing against leaves. And then, another chilling sensation, the weight of a gaze, heavy and intense, on the back of my neck. With my heart hammering in my chest, I slowly turned, half expecting to see a faceless figure lurking in the shadows. But there was nothing, just the dense trees and the haunting silence. The rational part of my brain tried to wrest control. "It's just your mind playing tricks," I told myself. "The isolation, the dark, it's messing with your senses." But the feeling of being watched persisted. Determined to put as much distance between me and the clearing as possible, I resumed my hike with renewed vigor. Every rustling leaf, every snapping twig heightened my sense of dread. As I neared my usual camping spot, a small nook overlooking a serene lake, I felt the hand again. This time, however, it didn't just grab mine. It pulled. Hard. I nearly lost my balance, the force of the pull catching me off guard. My flashlight tumbled from my grip, its beam cutting a swathe through the darkness before sputtering out. In the inky blackness, I felt it, the undeniable presence of another mere inches away. The cold, intense gaze bore into me, filling me with a terror I'd never known. My instincts kicked in, and I bolted, abandoning my camping gear and sprinting down the trail with reckless abandon. Branches and shrubs scratched at my face, but I paid them no mind. All that mattered was escape. Time lost meaning as I ran. The unseen companion seemed to be everywhere and nowhere at once. The hand would grasp mine periodically, sending me into a fresh bout of terror each time. Then, as suddenly as it began, it stopped. The weight in the air lifted. I slowed to a stop, gasping for air, my sides burning. The forest was quiet once more, the chirping crickets and distant owl once again my only companions. I never did find an explanation for what happened that night. Some friends suggested it was a result of exhaustion. Others thought I had encountered a protective spirit. But I know what I felt, the cold, unyielding grasp of something not quite human. I've always prided myself on having an excellent sense of direction. So, when my friends suggested a late-night hike in the forest where we played as kids, I was more than confident. The trails, the landmarks, every nook and cranny was imprinted in my memory. Or so I thought. The moon hung low in the sky, casting a silvery glow over the forest, turning it into a monochromatic wonderland. I led the way, reminiscing about our childhood adventures. There was the creek where we caught frogs, the mossy boulder where we told ghost stories, and the old tree with its gnarled branches that looked like the hands of a witch, familiar and comforting landmarks. Around midnight, we decided to head back. I guided our group toward what I remembered to be the path home. That's when things began to get strange. The mossy boulder that we passed only an hour before appeared once again in our path. Confused, I thought we might have unknowingly looped back. Brushing off the unease settling in my gut, I turned us around, making a mental note of the direction. But half an hour later, that same boulder appeared for the third time. My friend Clara, always the logical one, laughed it off. "Looks like our fearless leader got us lost," she teased. But her voice wavered, betraying her own rising anxiety. "I don't understand," I murmured. "These are the woods of our childhood. How can we be lost?" Our journey took a more desperate tone. We pressed on, hoping to find a familiar path or even the distant lights of our town. Yet, the same landmarks greeted us again and again. The creek, the boulder, the witch-like tree. Panic bubbled up. Our once jovial group was now silent, each lost in their thoughts, every rustle of the leaves amplifying our fears. It felt like the forest had turned on us, reshuffling itself to keep us trapped. The air grew cold, and a dense fog rolled in, further disorienting us. The moonlight no longer seemed inviting, but instead took on a mocking tone, highlighting the same dreaded landmarks. Every so often, in the thickening fog, I'd catch a glimpse of a shadowy figure darting between the trees. At first, I dismissed it as my imagination, but as the night wore on, its presence became more palpable. It seemed to be leading us, coaxing us deeper into the forest's embrace. Clara was the first to mention it. "Do you see that? That figure?" "I thought it was just me," admitted Jake, his voice trembling. We huddled close, our torches forming a small circle of light in the overwhelming darkness. The figure continued its dance, always just out of clear sight, but its silhouette was unmistakable. A plan formed. We'd head in the opposite direction of the figure, hoping it would lead us out of this never-ending loop. With renewed determination, we walked on, using the recurring landmarks as our guide. Hours seemed to pass. Exhaustion weighed down on us. And then, a glimmer of hope. In the distance, the soft glow of streetlights cut through the fog. Our pace quickened, adrenaline pushing us forward. But as we got closer, our hearts sank. It wasn't the lights of our town. Instead, we were met with the all-too-familiar sight of the mossy boulder. Despair set in. Would we ever escape this nightmare? Then, from the thick blanket of fog, the figure emerged. It wasn't menacing or large. It appeared as a silhouette of a young child, no older than we were when we first started playing in these woods. It stood still, gazing at us, a silent plea in its posture. For reasons unknown, I felt drawn to it. I took a tentative step forward. "Who are you?" I whispered. The figure didn't speak. Instead, it slowly extended its hand, pointing towards a direction we hadn't tried before. Without much choice, and driven by a mix of desperation and trust, we decided to follow the path it indicated. The journey felt different this time. The once mocking moon now bathed us in a gentle glow. As dawn's first light began to pierce the horizon, the fog lifted, and we found ourselves on a familiar trail, leading straight to the outskirts of our town. We didn't speak much on our way back, each processing the night's harrowing events. The figure, or child, or whatever it was, had vanished with the fog, leaving us with more questions than answers. It's been years since that night, and we've never ventured into those woods after dark again. The landmarks of our childhood, once sources of joy and nostalgia, now serve as eerie reminders of the night the forest turned on us and the mysterious figure that led us home. Some nights, when the moon hangs low and the world is bathed in silver, I can't help but wonder about the figure. Was it a guardian of the woods, a lost child, or something else? I guess I'll never know. But one thing is certain. Sometimes, even in the most familiar places, you can find yourself completely and utterly lost. The allure of solo camping had always been about the silence, the serenity, a chance to disconnect and let nature wash over you. But that night, as I lay ensconced in my tent nestled at the edge of a quiet forest, the silence was disrupted in a way I could never have foreseen. Awoken abruptly by an instinctual sense of unease, I glanced at my watch. 3:03 a.m. I strained to listen, wondering if some nocturnal creature had rustled nearby. But it was silent, save for the soft hush of leaves in the breeze. Frowning, I decided to step outside, maybe to get some fresh air. That's when I saw them. Footprints, deep and pronounced, led directly to my tent and then retreated back into the forest. They weren't mine. Larger than any humans, they bore a strange, elongated shape, with 5 toes ending in what seemed to be sharp claws. A heavy dread settled in my chest. I was miles away from the nearest campsite or hiker's path. Who or what could have left these? My first instinct was to pack up and leave. But fatigue and the stillness of the night gave me pause. Could it be just some animal I wasn't familiar with? Perhaps it was a prank by some locals or other campers. Trying to convince myself it was a harmless anomaly, I decided to go back into the tent. I reassured myself that in the clarity of daylight, things would be more discernible. The night passed uneasily. Every sound, every whisper of the wind heightened my anxiety. But exhaustion finally took over, and sleep claimed me once again. Morning light brought with it both relief and a fresh wave of terror. The footprints from last night, which I'd hoped would make more sense in daylight, had multiplied exponentially. My tent now sat at the epicenter of hundreds of these bizarre tracks, all circling it in a meticulous, dizzying pattern. It looked like a ritualistic dance had taken place around my sleeping form. Panicking, my earlier decision to stay seemed foolish. I hurriedly packed my essentials, leaving behind anything non-critical. My heart raced as I tried to shake off the feeling of countless eyes watching from the shadowy embrace of the trees. As I hastily made my way to my car parked at the edge of the woods, the otherwise beautiful sounds of the forest now seemed mocking. Birds chirped, and distant animals called out, but all I could think of was the unknown visitors from the night before. Driving away, the dense forest gave way to open roads. The events of the night seemed almost surreal in the light of day. I had so many questions. What creature had made those footprints? Why were they so interested in my tent? And most chillingly, what might have happened if I had ventured out again before dawn? The experience remains one of the most unsettling ones of my life. Now, when the itch to go camping arises, I always ensure I'm not alone. For in the depth of nature's beauty, there are mysteries that perhaps some of us are not meant to unravel.